Hello and welcome to this video where I cover patch 12.7 and how it may affect MSI. Obviously not all buffs and nerfs are created equally. Some don't affect pro play at all, but it's nice to look at players' champion pools versus buffs and nerfs and say, okay, well this is all of a sudden on the table for this player and maybe this champion is completely off the table in all the tournament in general, which is actually going to be the case for a couple champions, I believe, in this patch. At least how it could affect all teams equally. I'm talking about Lee Sin and Rise, but it's kind of an interesting thing to look at. You look at the players, champion pools, and you look at the champions that were buffed and nerfed, and you say, okay, what teams are helped and what teams are hurt by this? If you haven't watched one of my videos before, I've done this for every patch so far in the 4 major regions, and I'm doing this special for MSI this time around. Tomorrow I'll have 12.8 up as well, being the MSI patch. So, teams that were buffed. I feel like the Wildcats, RNG, and PSG Talon were the 3 teams helped the most by this patch. Or better yet, least harmed, I guess. Well, no, they were helped the most. Because there were a lot of buffs on this patch and only 4 nerfs. And Lee Sin affected everybody except Detonation Focus Me. They didn't use a lot of Lee Sin the last few years, while Steel hasn't. Rise was on most teams' nerf list, except the Wildcats, Saigon Buffalo, and Order. So those 3 teams didn't use Rise all that much in this past split in the last couple of years. At least their mid laners haven't. So, I mean, it doesn't affect them all that much. And Zeri affected a couple teams, but the Wildcats are helped by Holy Phoenix playing a lot of Kalista last year. I believe it was the most played champion by him last year. So all of a sudden, maybe Kalista's on the table. Wukong is on the table. Yasuo is also a champion that Saren has used in the past a great deal. All of these champions that are listed here were at least in the top 3 most used champions by a player on that roster within the last 3 years. Exception being Nico, because she hasn't been in the meta for even longer than that. RNG, Bin was really helped. GP, Gwen, Wukong, and Pantheon were all buffed. Pantheon being a benefit for Wei, but GP being buffed. Bin plays a lot of GP, and we may see a lot of GP in this tournament. PSG also, Hanabi is helped by GP being buffed. Lilia now being on the table for Yuhan for PSG as well. I mean, PSG is, I think, what were my point? My point system and how I determined this, I think PSG were slightly buffed, and obviously the Wildcats and RNG significantly buffed by comparison. Middle here, we have 4 teams: Saigon Buffalo, G2, Evil Geniuses, and Red Canids. You wonder, why is there a question mark here? And it's because there's a little bit of both going on here. We don't know how this patch is going to affect these teams because they're both helped and hurt by it. And you'll say, oh, well, EG has 3. I mean, EG has 3 champions nerfed but 2 buffed. Why aren't they over here? Well, it's all about usage. If it was the 3rd most used champion by a player, it's not equivalent to what might be the most used champion by a player on another team. So, Saigon Buffalo used a lot of Jace. They've used a lot of Jace recently. They're helped by Nico. The Nico buff actually helps more than just T1. Saigon Buffalo might look at a little bit of Nico action. Flack had played a lot of Kalista in the past. Maybe he can play that for G2. Inspired was a big Lilia player a couple years ago. Evil Geniuses can be helped by Lilia. And Red Canids, they have played a little bit of Gwen in the past. That may be a benefit to them if they want to play a little bit of Gwen. They're hurt by Lee Sin and Rise, just like everybody else, but more so than maybe a team on this list because they utilize Lee Sin and Rise more. And that's kind of a thing. Like, if you use it more, you're going to be hurt more by it being taken out of your champion pool, or at least being nerfed and hurting you when you do pick it. The teams that were most nerfed, Detonation Focus Me, were barely affected by this patch. Only the Rise nerf hurt them. Their champion pools are odd compared to everyone else's. really weren't affected. Team order, Lee Sin was used by 2 players on their team. It's not only used by the jungler, Kevy, but also used by Kisei and mid on occasion, at least in years past. So that's a double whammy. They've used Karthus and Yone. Like I said in my first video today, Karthus and Yone were possibly showing up on this video, and they are for order. It's going to be real interesting, especially Yone, because no one else has got Yone listed here, so that's a big deal. T1, I mean, T1 still could very well win this tournament. This is whatever, but they use a lot of Jace, they use a lot of Lee Sin and Ryze. Those 3 champions nerfed. They like to use Gwen in the past, and they like to use Nico. Those 2 champions were buffed. There's potential for usage there. And Team Ace, double whammy with Jace. Both top and mid, both solo laners like using Jace. Jace's nerf might take him off the table. Lee Sin, Ryze, and obviously Gwen. Gwen helped a lot of teams here. I'm trying to look. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 teams weren't helped by the Gwen buff. Now, in the end, does that help them? Could we see these teams using other... I mean, hypothetically, anybody can use Yone, or anybody can use Gwen, or GP, or whatever. And maybe it is the only champion that is used. Maybe it becomes the meta, and everybody's using it, regardless of how much they've played in the past. But all you can look at right now is, historically, what have players done in the past, and how might that affect, MSI? Like, how is a player's champion pool going to be affected by a patch at MSI? So it's interesting to look at, and see, okay, well, all of a sudden now maybe RNG are a little bit more competitive against T1 than we thought. We knew it was going to be a toss-up, but now it might be even closer, because RNG, all of a sudden, Bin has a bunch of champions that, he hasn't been playing recently all that much. It's been on the table for him, but, all of a sudden they got buffed. So all of a sudden, RNG, that Bin Zace matchup in top lane that we're all expecting in the finals, which who knows if, it's, who knows. But at the same time, all of a sudden, Bin gets a lot of help in that matchup where Zeus gets hurt because Jace is out. Just as an example. So comment down below on your opinions on this patch. Obviously, like I said, not all buffs and nerfs are created equally. Some buffs and nerfs won't take champions out of the meta, and that makes sense. Some teams might try and stick with the champion regardless and still play it, and we'll be like, oh, well, they're still playing it. And it's like, yeah, but it's not as useful anymore, and that team is getting a net loss out of the pick, which is very common for League. Players doing the wrong, teams drafting weird and drafting incorrectly. But yeah, so comment down below if you have any opinions of your own on 12.7. Tomorrow I'll have 12.8. There's, I think, 17 champions on that patch. So I have a lot of work to do today for that. Tomorrow I have my next team in my MSI preview, and I don't, maybe it's Detonation. It's probably Detonation Focus Me, because I had 7 today. Detonation Focus Me, PSG, and then the Big 4. So that'll be tomorrow. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe to the channel if you like daily League of Legends content. Like the video if you liked it. And yeah, thank you for watching.